All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. I am getting on live this evening. And I just wanted to talk about, y'all, I wanted to talk about a crowning moment today. And I believe that this is going to encourage somebody. I talked about this Bible character that so many people can relate to. Okay. I talked about him at this event on Friday called Night of the Prophets. Okay. And it really fit right in. Last week, I talked about overcoming being overwhelmed because many times we can get so easily overwhelmed, just trying to figure things out, or we're multitasking. We have so much going on. Sometimes we're overextending ourselves. We, just have so many different tasks. Some things God may have sent us to do, some things we decided that we were going to do. And it's so important to have discernment so we can determine which is which, because if God sends you something or he gives you a task to do, he's going to help you through it. And it's not to say it's not going to be a challenge, but you're not by yourself, right? So, this story, this Bible character really encouraged me. I pray that it's going to encourage you, especially if you've ever felt like the underdog. I think that's like a phrase that I think many Americans used. Or if you felt like, the way the Bible describes it is the least of them, not the one that is the most appealing, or where it's like, oh, it's so obvious, like that this person is going to be somebody. This story is about Gibeon. Okay. I was, I feel like there are times in my life where I relate, very close to Gibeon. Gibeon is a leader, by the way. He's a leader, and he had a weighty assignment. Gibeon wanted, I believe Gibeon desired to please God. He had a close relationship with God. So many of us want to hear from God. We want to know how to hear from God clearly so we can get instructions and direction, so we can fulfill our purpose and all of that. But Gibeon, he had a big assignment, yet he had doubts. He had some serious doubts. And I can understand why, because God was calling him to be a rescue. And I'm even reminded right now that, and this is what I talked about last Friday, is many times we are diving into the wrong thing, the wrong opinions, right? We're so used to hearing other people's perspective of us, or our brains are, I guess, storing information about things that happened in the past that were bad experiences, but then it guides us in a way that inhibits us in the future, if that makes sense. Because of what happened in the past, I'm limiting myself in the future because I don't want to repeat that same experience. I don't want that same negative thing where somebody labeled me as dumb or stupid, or whatever the case is, that our little person that was hurt in the past many times will show up, and our brain is like, I want to protect her. Don't do that speaking engagement. Don't go live. Don't write the book. Don't do this. Don't make a suggestion at work. Don't stand up as a leader. Don't advocate for yourself. Don't have boundaries, because we don't want to feel somebody else's disappointment, or we don't want to feel somebody else's wrath. So Gibeon was challenged by God because he dived into God, not necessarily the people's opinions, but he decided, okay, well, I'm going to dive into God because that is my maker, right? So we have a maker who formed us and called us, right? So when we dive into God, you will automatically begin to know who you are, because you form a relationship with the person that knew you before he formed you. Does that make sense? When you dive into God, you begin to form a relationship with the person that knew you before he even formed you. All right. Because we know that even in Jeremiah, if you check out Jeremiah chapter 1, I wasn't even planning on going in all of this, but if you check out Jeremiah chapter 1, that's what he told him. He said, I knew you before I even formed you in the womb. Right. And before you even came out of the womb, I sanctified you, and I gave you a calling as a prophet. So both, I'm telling you, before you even exited your mother's womb, you had a calling. There was a calling on your life. Right. So the way to fulfill our purpose is by relationship with God, going back to Him. That's foundational teaching. Going back to Him, defining your DNA, which is what I talk about all the time. Because everybody has a crown that awaits them, but many of us are so accustomed to the DNA that we're used to on earth versus manifesting the DNA the DNA of Christ that is on the inside of us when we become children of God. So this journey should really be about getting to know yourself through Christ. So this was Gibeon's challenge. God wanted him to lead an army because they were about to be attacked. The children of Israel were about to be attacked. And God was calling Gibeon to be a rescue. Many of you, God is calling to be somebody's rescue. Somebody is waiting on what you're sitting on is one of my favorite quotes by a lady named Dr. Wood. Somebody is waiting on what you're sitting on. Because God, if you are alive, you have purpose, and God has deposited something on the inside of you. You're meant to be a generational breaker. You're not meant to remain in a generational pattern that you are familiar with. So what was Gibeon's response? It was a response like many of us. It was like, he looked at the size of his army in comparison to the size of the army that was coming up against him. And we do that. We like, okay, I'm gonna size you up. Many times we even compare ourselves. And then as a result, we feel inadequate. We may do that on social media or in our families, or maybe we're used to being compared to the next person or to a sibling or whatever the case is, right? So that's what Gibeon did. He began to compare the size of the army, which seems like, strategic to do, especially when you're operating with probability. It's like, okay, well, historically, and the evidence shows and the facts show and the reality is, and when we start to reason and analyze, we are not using faith. We're using earthly wisdom. Which is why the scriptures say that his word says without faith it is impossible to please God. It's going to take going beyond what you know in order to fulfill your assignment. And it's going to take his hand connected to you, to your hand, a partnership in order to fulfill your assignment. Right? So Gibeon is like, you know what? I'm sizing up my army against the army that's coming up against us. And he's like, you know what? We're the least of them. How can I be a rescue? How can this be my calling? It doesn't make sense. But he was talking to a God. We're talking to a God who also describes himself as I am. I am, we can't put him in a box, and he does many things that don't make sense because he wants people to know it was him that did it. So he likes to do things that don't make sense. So human reasoning is not going to fit into it. Right? But there's something about recognizing that we can't do it by ourselves. And when we just put that aside anyway, when we put our human reasoning aside and we realize, well, it's meant for us to be dependent on God, and we obey. And many times we need support through it. Many times we need support, like-minded people. I was just speaking with someone today about the courage of even outgrowing certain relationships and certain friendships that she had been used to. That is like the same conversations, the same things that isn't necessarily pushing her to grow. Beautiful woman, just amazing, courageous woman. And even that takes courage, right? So if only we obey, our destinies can be unlocked. Do you want your destiny to be unlocked? Right? Even when you're watching this, when you're watching the replay, so just type in the chat, I want my destiny to be unlocked. I don't want any more limitation. I don't want to continue making excuses. Today is my day to overcome. I have purpose. I have a plan, right? So, God tells him, I want you to go and give me an offering. And not only that, I want you to go take this idol down that is in your father's household. So he's like, all right, God, I'm going to do this. And it wasn't that simple. If you go back and read the story, Gibeon, it's like, okay, well, did God really say this? And if you really did say this, he put God to the test. He did a few different things. And he was like, all right, God, don't be mad at me. I'm doubting that I heard your voice. So I want you to show me a sign. So which we do the same thing. Like, did God really talk to me? Did God really tell me to go and open an orphanage? Did God really tell me to be the director of a homeless shelter? Did God really tell me to buy land and start a house flipping business? Did God really tell me to go into fashion? Did God really tell me to be a singer and write songs? Did God really tell me to move? Like sometimes we're doubting. And we've asked God for instruction, and sometimes we're doubting the instruction. And it's important to also discern God's voice from the enemy's voice and from our own thoughts, right? And that's even a journey in itself. So he was doubting, but anyways, he followed the instructions. He waits until it's nighttime to go and pull down this idol, and he takes some help with him. He had, some key people who were there to help. Right. And he waited until it was nighttime because he didn't want his father in the household and the people in the village that was used to that idol being there. It was a false god that they would worship. They were so used to that idol being there. He was like, I'm not going to do it while it's daytime because they're going to be mad at me. So he did it while it was nighttime. The next morning, they were definitely upset. They were upset. And they even, were like, oh, this person should be destroyed. But fortunately, his father actually ended up sticking up for him. Right? His father stuck up for him. Let me tell you, God will also give us instructions and tell us to do some things that are just uncomfortable, that are daunting, that we're afraid of. Right. And it goes against the grain of what we're used to. Our family members may not understand. It may not fit in with what we've done before or what the people around us in our environment is used to, which is why it's so important to be in an environment where your seeds can grow, where people are not just talking about the same thing. And another year has passed and they're talking about the same thing, but not implementing. Right. And this is not about, this is not a condemnation message. Remember, there's no condemnation to those in Christ Jesus who walk not after the flesh, but after the spirit. So even creating discipline is a journey. It is a journey, but it's within us. It is absolutely within you. Right. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Also means he is consistent. That means if he is consistent and we're made in his image, it is in us to be consistent. And many times we just need accountability and support. We need to be in the right environment. I am more likely to push myself and go if I'm around individuals who are also doing that as well, who are with me in this season. Okay. Which I call like destiny helpers, like godly connections, good friendships. Right. So anyways, they're upset. Right. His father stands up for him. He was like, you know what? If Baal, that was the name of the false god. He said, if Baal has power, let him destroy the one that took the idol down. Not only that, they ended up even changing Gibeon's name to something called Jerubbaal. Like they changed his name based off of an action that they thought he did wrong. Like how many of us are used to that as well? Like maybe we made a mistake in the past. And sometimes, we are, rehearsing that mistake, or we're counting ourselves out. We're feeling like the least of them. So we, don't take certain opportunities in the future. We don't speak up like, it is in us to speak up. We don't set maybe certain boundaries. We don't advocate, or sometimes to go to the extreme. And it's like, maybe we've become overly aggressive or, rigid, or whatever the case is. We're dancing on these extremes that's not truly like us. It doesn't really honor who we are in Christ, because we've internalized a label from the past, or because we made a mistake, and now someone is identifying us by that label. I know I've been through that. I know I know it's not just, it's not just me though, but I've certainly been through that, right? I've counted myself out. I've made mistakes, and I felt like the least of them, right? So anyhow, he's like, okay, that's fine. So time goes on, and what happens next? Um, so God has a conversation with Gibeon, and he says, all right, so there's like 32,000 soldiers, which is a lot, but the army that they were going up against was still much larger. They were bigger. They were larger. And he said, you know what? Even though that army is larger and you have 32,000, that's too many. I actually want you to downsize. So again, with a mind, like when we're reasoning, like, hold on, that doesn't make sense. Like, wouldn't we want more? I already feel like I'm the least of them. We already feel like our army's the weakest. But when you have God on your side, labels don't matter. Statistics don't matter. Demographics don't matter. Your mindset is what matters. And you renewing your mind and you understanding who you are through Christ, because you are a peculiar treasure. And even decree that over yourself. Like, that is a Monday tip right there. A crowning Monday moment tip is even to decree of yourself, I am a peculiar treasure. I have the salt and the light. I am a solution. I am meant to be different. I am made for this. With God, I will always win, because you're speaking truth over yourself. So that is so important. That is so important, especially the times that we're in, y'all. This year is going to be, you're going to see a lot of different things happening. How do I know this? Because of prophecy. So you're going to see a lot of different things happening, but in God, you will have peace. It doesn't mean you're not going to be challenged, but you can have peace. You can have rest, because you'll know, I'm not going to choose to be anxious about this, because all the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, right? So he's like, God is like, I want everybody to know that it was me that did this. So I want the army to downsize. So, he told him, he said, I think he said, like, at the top of the mountain, tell them if anybody is afraid, you can go ahead and go home. So Gibeon tells them, he's like, all right, if you're afraid, you can go home. Automatically, I think 20,000 leaves. 20,000 soldiers leave, and it leaves him with only 10,000. God says, that's still too much. He said, that's still too much, and I want them to actually do a test. And after they do this test, I'm going to distinguish who should stay and who should leave. So he has them do the test. Only 300 people passed the test. Y'all go and read it. Only 300 people passed this test. I'm thirsty. Only 300 people passed this test, right? So all the other people leave. So now it's just Gibeon and 300 soldiers. But God is like, I got this. It doesn't matter if you think, we don't have a plan. I have the plan. It's as long as you're in his divine timing, and he will unction you. He will let you know, okay, this is the time. Meanwhile, still follow the instructions, because sometimes we just stop altogether, and we do nothing. And then, unless God says do nothing, but many times there are things that he is telling us to do in the preparation period. And then you go, and then you launch. And as you develop a relationship with God, you'll pick up on those things. All right, I'm going to be working on this. I'm going to build my consistency. I'm not going to get discouraged. I'm not going to, focus on the people or the giants or what I think is a giant, when I serve the one true God, the creator, the maker of all, right? So, Y'all, like essentially what he does, God does, is he sends confusion into the enemy's camp, and the enemy begins to fight each other. They begin to fight each other. So even Gibeon and his army really didn't have to put forth a whole lot of effort, right? So they win, and people know, okay, no, God, the God, the one true God, is certainly with Gibeon, is certainly with him. So when we humble ourselves, or we are not just like looking at, our limitations, and we just realize, okay, with God in my weaknesses, his strength is made perfect. I'm not by myself. I'm not lonely. You know, God can use anybody, and he will exalt the humble as long as you are humble, as long as you are connected and submitted to him. Great things will happen. It is meant for you to do great exploits. It is meant for you to do great things while you are here. You are a whole mission wrapped up in a fleshly suit. Okay? Like, you are a mission. You have a calling on your life. So Gibeon's crowning moment was realizing that it doesn't matter if you have, just a handful of people with you, as long as God is with you, as long as you're in his will. So even the final revelation I got from that, like 32,000 to 300, you don't need everybody. You don't need a whole, hundreds of people. If I were to even look at my phone list, like, there's so many contacts that I can actually delete, that it's just like a placeholder, that's been in here for years and years and years, just kind of taking up space. Even think about that. Like, are these relationships that are helping you? And this is not about like being, divisive, or I'm not taking anybody with me to this next level. What I'm just saying is, not everybody is meant to go with you. Sometimes we're hanging on to relationships, and it's actually relationships that don't benefit us. It could be toxic relationships. That's what I'm talking about. So he cleared out who wasn't supposed to be there, and essentially he put his destiny helpers there. I pray that he will show you who your destiny helpers are, who those godly connections are that are going to help you get to the next level, who are there to be there with, who are meant to be there with you when you win, in the winning, because you are meant to win. You're born to win. You shall win. Okay. It is time for you to define your DNA. It is time for you to explore who you are through Christ. It is an amazing journey. It is an amazing journey. I'm telling you, y'all, I'm on this thing. All right. I am your sister in transformation. God bless you. Take care. Tag a sister that you believe it will help her. And if you're in the Facebook group, invite a sister. Invite a sister. Anyways,